Hello, my name is Kerrigan Monday, and my history topic is on Prohibition in regards to public health. Causes and onsets of Prohibition. Prohibitionists thought the liquor industry was the greatest threat to society in the 20th century. Originally, Prohibition was a religious movement. However, it developed into a public health initiative when the founders understood the toxic side effects of alcohol and deemed the American society much healthier without the seductive wiles of alcohol in their system. The temperance movement aligned with the progressivism movement at the time, which was really appealing to the citizens of America. They promised the energization of political reform, promoting community welfare, and improving public health, which motivated people to align with the Prohibition movement even more. In 1919, the 18th Amendment passed, prohibiting the selling and distribution of alcohol. However, they never defined what an intoxicating beverage was, which led to the Volstead Act being passed and deemed an intoxicating beverage to contain 0.5% or more alcohol by volume, which if you had a beverage with very little alcohol in it, it would actually still be illegal because this percentage was so low. Since alcoholism and prohibition is a public health problem, alcohol was proven to be a depressant and associated with crime, mental illness, and disease, which affects the overall well-being of a person. On average, 1,000 Americans died every year during Prohibition from the effects of drinking tainted liquor. Since people could not buy liquor from proper distilleries, they would make their own distilleries with whatever resources and equipment they had within their households, which usually led to their death by drinking tainted liquor. In the early years of the 20th century, the rate of death caused by liver cirrhosis were 15 per 100,000, and chronic alcoholism was 10 per 100,000, which was really big numbers for the 20th century, which motivated the Prohibition movement even more. Prohibition also contributed to many industries closing down and massive job losses, which created a lot of stress in that period, which increased the reliance of alcohol even more. Leading to the ending of Prohibition, Prohibition initially had the mindset to limit drinking and control the usage of alcohol. However, it had the opposite effect. If you look at this graph, during the beginning of Prohibition, the numbers drastically spiked in alcohol consumption and then steadily declined until Prohibition was repealed, and then it drastically declined again, which seems like there is a direct correlation in alcohol consumption and Prohibition, since people had to rely on illegal ways to get alcohol. Beer consumption decreased by 70%, however, wine and spirits increased. Wine consumption increased by 65%, and spirits increased by 10%. A big motivating person in the repeal of Prohibition was Matthew Wall, who in 1931 voiced to President Herbert Hoover that Prohibition was causing a distrust and resentment of the government, and the working class felt like the government was abusing their power and infringing on their rights. The 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment in 1933, and following that, Franklin Roosevelt was sworn in, and he revised the Volstead Act, which increased the intoxicating level of a beverage. Some agencies and interventions that were introduced because of Prohibition. Rockefeller was actually a very influential person in the repeal of Prohibition, and he created huge industries for alcohol control and created monopolies in the industry. And he actually wrote Towards Liquor Control, which urged for other agencies to be introduced to stop habitual drunkenness and alcoholism. These urgencies led to agencies such as Alcoholics Anonymous, National Council on Alcoholism, and National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Following Prohibition, drinking age was raised to 21 in nearly all states, and the Association Against the Prohibition Amendment was an anti-prohibition group who believed that the federal government was abusing their power and infringing on rights. Some public health takeaways from Prohibition and what I've stated recently in the previous slides. Alcohol prohibition is not a sound public policy, and actually alcohol control policies are much more effective in the reduction of alcohol consumption. Prohibition was actually an example of paternalism in the 1920s because it infringed on the Americans' rights, and it was the government telling them what they could and could not do. Some public health strategies that were introduced were displaying alcohol percentages on cans and glasses so everyone would know the percentage that they were drinking, the raise in drinking age, the CDC guidelines for alcohol consumption, and the NABCA, which was a regulatory system such as like the FDA for food. They regulated alcohol and what was deemed healthy to consume by American citizens. And also another public health takeaway is looking at this graph. It shows what people, their level of drinking, what they consider themselves hazardous drinkers or high-risk drinkers, and their reliance on alcohol. People with hazardous and high-risk drinking reliances actually rated themselves with poor overall health, which shows that alcohol actually has a poor relation to health deemed by individuals. Here are the references I used, and that is my presentation. Thank you.